Welcome to another episode of the podcast.
Yeah.
This week is Thanksgiving week. So, as we try to be current, we try to be topical, I was racking my brain for how can we do Thanksgiving on the podcast? Because the reality is,
there are no Thanksgiving movies.
People aren't really cranking out Thanksgiving themed movies. You're right.
By default, the new movie Thanksgiving would have to be on our list, and we haven't even seen it.
Yeah, I was going to ask, have you had a chance to see it?
No, I will be seeing it, though, because Molly wants to go see it. So.
Yeah.
So it would be Thanksgiving and Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, I think would be the list.
Yeah, that'd be the exhaustive list.
Yeah, it would.
What conclusion we came to was, what is Thanksgiving known for? It's known for kind of gathering with family, celebrating good times, but it's a nostalgic holiday. It's as you think back what you're thankful for, you're thinking back just like all the good times in life.
Right.
And so we figured we could celebrate Thanksgiving by capturing that same spirit and celebrating sort of the good memories of movies throughout our lives.
Oh yeah.
So this is a little different than, we've talked about comfort movies and things like that. This is a little away from the actual movies themselves and more about the experiences. I will sort of break the ground. I'll go first.
Okay.
With something that wasn't that long ago, and now I actually associate Thanksgiving with movie watching because several years ago, probably, 5 years ago, I had a Thanksgiving where I went to 3 different people's invited me to family Thanksgiving meals, and I was just house bouncing, for Thanksgiving, eating food. And that was a lot of fun, but it's also like I'm an introvert. It can be a little exhausting. By the end of the day, I was like, I've been around people all day.
I need some me time.
The next year, I was like, you know what? And part of the problem is I feel bad saying no to anybody because I don't usually have Thanksgiving plans. So if someone invites me, it's like, I can't be like, no, I'm just going to stay at home by myself.
Right.
So I said, this year what I'm going to do, this was 2019, I said, I'm going to the movie theater to watch some movies by myself. It's a whole free day.
That's awesome.
It's going to be a movie marathon. And I went to the theater and I watched Knives Out, Ford versus Ferrari, and Jojo Rabbit.
Wow. I remember this. I remember talking to you about this.
I'll be honest,
best Thanksgiving ever?
Best Thanksgiving ever, and I have been chasing that high ever since.
Right? That's amazing.
Now, what I've learned is that is a rare, great lineup for a Thanksgiving day because in the years since, I go look, I'm like, is it, what are the 3 movies I want to see? I can't find 3 movies I want to see, usually.
Yeah. In those, you found 3 really good movies.
Yes.
That's an impressive list.
I can't believe I spent all day in the theater and I loved every minute of my theater experience that day. It was it last year or the year before? The years are starting to run together now. I couldn't find 3 movies in theaters, so my Thanksgiving tradition was I went an R-squared trilogy, Ryan Reynolds trilogy.
Nice.
Free Guy, Red Notice, and Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard. Not as high quality of movies, but it was just like, I'm going to sit at home and I'm just going to enjoy it.
But you know what? Ryan Reynolds is always, he's entertaining enough.
I would say that's the thing is, I'm a Ryan Reynolds guy.
I like Ryan Reynolds.
I think he's one of those guys, he's kind of like Will Ferrell, and that some people are like, I don't like his shtick. I can't do it, yeah. And some people are like, I love it. Like, it makes me laugh every time. And I'm on I love it. He makes me laugh.
This is not related to anything, but I'm proud to say that I like Ryan Reynolds going all the way back. I used to watch 2 Guys, a Girl, in a Pizza Place.
Same, yes.
Yeah, and it's like, this guy is carrying this show, and he is hilarious. And he is one of those guys, you could spot that charisma right from the get-go, even in a completely mediocre show like 2 Guys, a Girl, in a Pizza Place.
And he's really he's only honed it and improved it because even, his first big movie was Van Wilder. Mm-hmm. And that movie's not a good movie, but he's so good in it.
He's so good, yeah.
I'm like, Van Wilder, good movie. If I watch him, this is terrible, but he's so good.
Ryan Reynolds can just single-handedly carry a movie.
Yeah. But even looking back at that, I'm like, boy, he's come a long way from even that movie.
Yeah.
He's still a little young and goofy and hadn't quite
figured it all out. Yeah.
The timings and everything, but always had the great expressions. Anyways, so it just goes back
to a little Ryan Reynolds sidetrack.
You know what? It's always good to get a little distracted by Ryan Reynolds. By the way, greatest compliment I've ever gotten. We had a ref that would do a lot of our basketball games a couple years ago, and he doesn't ref our games anymore because he moved up to the college level, which he should. He was a really good ref. Younger guy, and he really cool guy. And we were at a tournament, and he was talking to us while we were up at this like tournament stage where we were running things, and he just he called me Ryan Reynolds, and I was like,
"You've never felt better about yourself, have you?"
Least accurate thing that I've ever heard,
but I'll take it.
I am taking it. I looked at my friends and I said, "This guy's so cool. We all love this guy," and he just called me Ryan Reynolds. Like, if kind of a dork called me that, or somebody, some old guy, it's like, hey, whatever. But when the young cool ref calls me Ryan Reynolds,
and you've been riding that ever since. No matter how bad life gets, one time someone called you Ryan Reynolds.
That's right. And Ryan Reynolds has never been more mortified.
Ryan Reynolds has been angry ever since.
Yeah, but so that's what I think of, like fond Thanksgiving memory. I look back at that, seeing those 3 movies in 2019 that were 3 of my favorite movies from that year. They're 3 movies that I've rewatched a lot. They're very rewatchable movies. And I just go like, man, I'm sort of chasing that high. So I've been even looking for this Thanksgiving. I've been looking at the theater schedes and going like,
you know what? I think you could pull it off this year.
I'm looking at Napoleon, a Ridley Scott movie. I'm looking at The Holdovers.
Uh-huh.
And then there's a new Taika Waititi movie.
Yes.
Speaking of Jojo Rabbit, what is it called? First Goal Wins or Last Goal Wins or something.
I think it's Last Goal Wins.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it would be at the same quality as your previous year, but I do think you could pull off 3 movies.
Yeah, so it's a very good possibility that'll be my Thanksgiving again this year.
Man, that's amazing.
Yeah.
If I was single, that would be my every single holiday. Every single holiday. Like Flag Day, going to the movies all day long. Can't wait.
Boxing Day. Peace out, guys.
Catch me at the theater on Boxing Day.
That's right. The only downside is because it's Thanksgiving, not a lot of places to eat are open, and so between movies, I was like, I think I had to went to like a gas station to get some snacks or something.
I thought you were gonna be like, I had so much candy that I was so hyped by you're just eating like Nerds clusters all day long at the theater for your meal. Well, now the theater sells like pizza and hot dogs but it's probably $17.99 for a slice of pizza.
Probably is.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's me kind of getting the ball rolling. You want to take a turn and? Okay.
Yeah. So when you suggested this, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a great topic, because when you love movies, like you and I love movies, the experience of watching movies, the theater experience, all that stuff, it is something that I always think is special in some way, shape, or form. Now, sometimes it's disappointing because you go see a movie you don't like, but especially for being a movie fan as long as I've been a movie fan, I have just a long, long list of experiences that I'm thankful for. Whether it's like the nostalgia thing, like thinking back to when I was a kid and that feeling of, like I talked about when we did the Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, like going to see the original Batman or the Tim Burton Batman, and that not being my favorite movie, but just being in awe of this line of people and this jam-packed theater and people wearing Batman shirts and stuff like that. That's my kind of experience that has stuck with me my whole life as a movie fan, because it was impactful to me. Mm-hmm. Like I think I even mentioned that, not my favorite movie, but it was like, it really opened my eyes to like, oh my gosh, the theater experience is just unbelievable. So I have a list, and I may be jumping the gun, but I kind of categorize mine into the kind of experiences and what they meant to me. Mm-hmm. So I'll let you dictate how you want to go about this podcast, but I have some categories.
You have some categories. See, you're better organized than I am too.
Which is almost never the case. Let's just say that.
I made a list of a bunch of movies, and I was like, each of these I have some sort of memory attached to that's just special, but I didn't really categorize it all. So let's do this. Let's have you maybe share some of your categories, and let's see if any of mine fall into a like category.
So I probably made myself sound more organized than I really am. I just have kind of 2 main categories.
Okay, fair enough.
But 2 things that made me think is, number one, it's the shared experience of movie watching. And what I mean by that, and I know you'll understand this, is when you love something, like you and I love movies, you want people that you love to experience what you love. if that makes any sense.
Absolutely.
So it's that shared experience, and sometimes too, even it's watching like in a theater, just the shared experience, even if it's with strangers, where you're just in this theater because you want to be there, and you're just watching something that you love, and you're hoping that everybody else in there loves it as much as you do. So I've got the shared experience, and then I've got a category of just movies that I'm thankful for and movie watching experiences I'm thankful for because they taught me about movies and why I love movies. If those make any sense at all. They make total sense to me.
No,
I don't know if they'll make any sense to you. Yeah. And then my last kind of just category was just a bunch of really good movies I threw into a category that I'm just thankful that over my years of movie loving that I was able to see and experience. Basically like movies that have become really famous or really part of the pulp culture and stuff that I'm just glad I was along for the ride.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a broad category, but it was just like, I don't know where else to put this, but these are just a list of movies that I'm really glad I've seen.
All right. Well, let's jump into that shared experience category.
Sure.
So what are some movies you've got listed there?
Sure. And I always hate to be repetitive because I know I've talked about this before, but seeing Jaws in the IMAX, that was just an amazing shared experience. My favorite movie, the IMAX, of course, is the best way to see a movie. Mm-hmm. Biggest screen, loudest sound, everything. So thankful for that. And I talked about this, so I won't dwell on it for too long. But my kids and a bunch of their friends came. So to be in that theater and a bunch of young people were getting to watch a movie they had never seen before, I was so happy for that. That made me so happy. I was so excited. Just to, they were sitting behind us, but kind of to listen to their reactions. They screamed when they should have screamed, and none of them came out of that. They were like, that's my new favorite movie. But I think they all liked it. And I was just so glad they got to experience that movie in IMAX. So that was a shared experience. Or do you want to bounce back and forth? Or do you want me to just go and do a few?
Go ahead and do a few.
Sure. So I do think the MCU for a long time was really good at this. Mm-hmm. Where, I'll narrow it down a little bit. I'll go with the Infinity War Endgame example, where that really felt like must see. Like it was a big deal. You knew this was going to be a big, huge blockbuster that was going to break all these records and stuff. And then you go. So like for me, we went, I think the Saturday that both of those movies came out, and took a big group of people, of friends.
I was with that group.
You were involved, yeah. And it was like, it felt like a big, it was like, this is a significant like pulp culture moment. Like I know over the next couple of days, a couple of weeks, whatever, this is going to be like a conversation point. Like, big Avengers movie. And you can pick out different ones, but I'm just going to go Infinity War. And then more so Endgame, because Infinity War had the cliffhanger of all cliffhangers with everybody getting dusted. Then you wait a year for Endgame. Marvel did an amazing job of keeping Endgame really secretive, not knowing what was going to happen. And so, talk about the ultimate shared experience. Just a bunch of movie-loving, comic book, superhero-loving nerds packed in a theater together. And I know, like, for Infinity War, when everyone got dusted, the audible, like, gasp. When we saw Infinity War, there were people crying.
Yeah.
And then for Endgame, just when everyone comes back, the cheers, that whole roller coaster, Iron Man dying. Again, you're hearing like literal adults crying in the theater. Mm-hmm. So that was just an amazing shared experience. And I'm just now realizing how long I've been talking for without you talking. So I'm sorry.
That's totally okay. I'm enjoying listening. There's two things about that I think are special. One, I've never really thought about it before until you were just talking about the anticipation of it. I think there's something to a movie that is so big and being looking forward to that you have to get tickets in advance. There's something about that knowing like
it feels so cool.
Yeah, I've got my ticket. Have you got your ticket? Like your tickets they're going to run out because this is a big deal. And that's always special, is knowing like it's special just having a ticket, even if it's just something online on your phone. Just knowing you've got the reservation and you had to have.
No one can take this away from me. I've got it.
I've got my spot, and that's just fun. The other thing is a movie like that when you go into a theater and everybody who's there is in. They're on board.
Yeah.
They know, like, we're all here. We're all ready to focus. You know, even like we talked about with our big group, there's a couple people in the group who aren't big Marvel fans. They're part of the family, and they're like, I'm going to go. And so they don't really care, but they're aware of what it is. So they're like, I'm not going to mess around here.
Yeah.
I know how important this is to you. So just everybody in the theater is just
kind of like-minded.
Yeah, you never, because sometimes you go to a movie and you can tell like a bunch of people in the theater are just like they had nothing else to do, so they came. And if the movie they get bored for a second, they'll talk. They're on.
You'll see a phone light up all of a sudden.
But there's nothing like going into a theater and knowing everybody's locked in.
Oh yeah. Well, I just think of like, I mean, I remember going to see Endgame, and literally when the movie started, like people just clapped.
Yeah.
Like literally, like, all right, the movie is on, and then all throughout the movie, you're getting the appropriate, cheers or the, oh my gosh, I can't believe that, and just, oh my gosh, like that's a moment I wish I could, capture and just relive, or just relive it for the first time again. Just an amazing, amazing shared experience. And then there's just life shared experience. Like I still remember. Like taking my kids to the movies for the very first time. It was just at the time, my kids. We just had Molly and Ryan, and we went to see Up.
Oh yeah.
And they were little, but it was like, oh my gosh, like I'm in the movie theater, which is something I love, and now my kids are in the movie theater with me.
Yeah.
So that's a cool experience. One I had written down was going to see, this is MCU again, but going to see Spider-Man No Way Home, because that was like post-COVID, and I'm certainly not trying to get into a whole COVID discussion, but it just was like packed theater, it was Christmas time, and it was like, this is probably going to sound ridiculous, but it was like, that movie to me felt like COVID's over.
Yeah.
Like, it's over, life is back to, we were all in a movie theater, my family and I, no mask, watching a movie. People were going crazy for that movie because of the surprises in it, and that was a big one. Again, like the shared experience, or it just felt like a moment. It really did. And I'm not trying to sound over dramatic, but it was like, oh my gosh, we've all been living in this COVID quarantine world, and now it was like it just kind of lined up with as that all that was winding down. So that was another cool one. And I've got more, but I'm talking a lot. So
no, that's all right. So one of my first movies I wrote down is a shared experience thing, but a different kind of shared experience. 2004. My dad is coaching my old high school's basketball team. He coached it for decades. And it's the year after I graduated high school, so I'm still close to a lot of the players of the team. They were a young team, and they made a surprise run to the state tournament. So I left college for a couple days and went with them to this tournament, which was in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. So they're staying at a hotel as long as they're in the tournament. Well, they win the first game on a Wednesday, I think. And then the way it's set up, they didn't play Thursday. They're going to play again Friday and Saturday. Friday, they're playing the top team in the tournament, a team they had played earlier in the year at a tournament and gotten beat pretty badly. So it was a pretty big underdog thing. And the day before, with the day off, we're like, we need something to do to kill time. We'll all go see a movie. And in movie theaters was Miracle.
Oh, wow.
The U.S. hockey team.
Yeah.
And perfect movie to go see with a group of underdogs you get to see. I didn't really know the story, so we're sitting in the theater, me and a bunch of the high school guys. I'm 1 year out.
Yeah.
So it's like peers. And as we're watching this movie, we're all already kind of in a great mood because we're at this tournament. We won our first game.
Yeah.
They won their first game. And the movie was so exciting. Like, we're like cheering the U.S. hockey team on. We're all getting pumped, excited, and we all loved the experience of it, and great movie experience. And then the next game, we play that top-ranked team. We went on a tip-in at the buzzer, so it's this really exciting, huge win for the school. We go into the locker room, and one of the guys starts chanting USA, and everybody just starts chanting USA, USA. Nice. So the movie just blends, blurs into, because, hey, we had that shared experience, and we just watched that story.
Absolutely.
Kind of inspired us, and then, connection to the game. So I've always, I've talked about it before, I love the movie Miracle, but I always think back to that first experience of watching it in the perfect environment, the perfect setup of we're kind of living this sports story, and it's going to correlate with us and connect to what we're doing.
Yeah, that's amazing. And movies have that power where, like, to me they do, where they just feel so important, and it's like, oh my gosh, this like correlates to this life event, or I don't know. That's the incredible stuff about. I love stuff like that.
Yeah.
Do you want me? I got a couple more too.
Go ahead.
So this is just some of this is random, but it is a shared experience that I got to have with my two boys. So once in a while, so I have this thing where, like, once in a while I'll just go on like Fandango and look at our local theaters, because like we've talked about before, and they don't do it enough, but theaters sometimes will just randomly play like some old movies. Mm-hmm. And I got on one day, this was maybe 3 years ago, let's say, and I get on and I'm just scrolling through, and I was like, oh my gosh, Inception is playing in the movie theater right now? Years after it had played. And Rocky 2 is playing at the movie theater right now. So in one night, me and my two boys, Ryan and Mitt, saw Rocky 2 and Inception in the movie theater. And it was like so random, but it was definitely a shared experience. And literally to this day, we will just randomly, like, we'll be eating dinner and we'll be like, remember when we saw Rocky 2 and Inception in the same night in the movie theater?
Yeah, what a pairing.
Oh my gosh.
It's really bizarre. It's like somebody said, hey, let's have tacos and steak.
Yeah. it's oh yeah. And it was Rocky 2 first and then Inception. Yeah. And that's the kind of stuff, and I have a million examples where I could name off stuff like this, but it's just like you get to experience, like I said, something you love, movies you love, even if it's two movies like that have nothing in common. And you get to share that with, whether it's, like in my case, it was my boys, and it was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome, like getting to have this experience with them. Or like we talked about with some of the MCU stuff, where it's just a huge theater of people, but you're all on the same page. Like, just like you were saying, like everyone knows, like Endgame's such a good example of, like, this is important to us movie nerds. We all knew, just like, we're going to sit here, we're going to behave. This is not the movie where we're getting our phones out, or we're getting up and sitting down, and just all that stuff just is so cool, and it just brings my inner movie nerd to life.
Yeah. One movie that had a similar build-up and feel, but not equal payoff, was when I was a kid and the first Star Wars prequel came out. I went to go see that with a group, including, it was like a couple of my teachers that I looked up to, a couple of the cool teachers that, when you're a kid, you're like, I want to be like these guys.
Sure.
And it was kind of cool that they took a group of us.
Yeah.
But I just remember right before the movie started, I started getting really antsy, shaky, and they were kind of like, what's wrong with you? And I was like, I just feel like I'm about to see something really important, because Star Wars was this big important franchise, and I'm about to see a new one in theaters. It felt like such a big deal that I was about to do that, and
it was a big deal.
Even though I don't look back and think much of that movie at all, I can still look back and think how big a deal it felt that I was seeing a Star Wars movie in theaters.
Oh yeah, I mean, literal years of hype and build up, but yeah, and unfortunately but I understand what you're saying completely.
Yeah, that was sort of a big one. Two Towers, I think I've talked about before, was another one. I've got my ticket thing. I think I've told the story that it came out, of course, Christmas time in December, and it came out the week of
your finals.
Right? Yeah. And I had a free period, and I went and stood in the line around the theater to get tickets for me and several of my friends. And when I came back to school, I was like, I got the tickets. It was a big deal. I remember I snuck in a big bag of Sour Patch Kids, and when I say a big bag, I mean it was one of these 5-pound bag things. Yeah. I had it in a jacket. When I pulled it out, I was sitting on the end of my group of friends next to a stranger because I was willing to do it. And
sure.
I pulled it out, and the guy next to me was like, dang, that's a big bag. And I was like, you want some? And he's like, I'm good, but thanks, man. He was just impressed. He's like, kudos, on the
job well done.
Giant bag of
I think you're onto something too. Is same with your Star Wars point, that those memories you have of movies that are so hyped up, and there's been so much build and anticipation, and it's probably a whole nother conversation whether it lives up to it or not. But to experience that, and especially when you get to experience it for the first time, whether it's your age or where you're old enough to understand the hype around something and the build up to it, and that's an amazing feeling.
Yeah. And then sort of the flip side of that is the movie that maybe isn't so much hype beforehand, but becomes such a big part of the conversation afterwards, like The Matrix. I think people are excited
the movie
about
that
it,
comes out of nowhere.
But once you see it, and you're one of those people like, have you seen it? Yeah, I saw it. Oh my gosh, you know. And then you start talking about it, and someone who hasn't seen it's like out of there, and you're like, dude, you haven't seen it? You've got to go see it.
Yeah.
And it's such an important, like you said,
kind of like the movie that nobody saw coming.
Yeah, because I mean, even the previews like look cool, but everybody's like, I mean, the preview was like, "What is the Matrix?"
Yeah.
And so we're like, "Yeah, what the heck is this thing?" And then you see it, and you're like, "This is incredible."
Yeah, it definitely was like a conversation point, like the
really
water cooler talk,
Yeah.
like you would say.
Yeah. I think just along the lines of talking about sharing movies with people, Gone in 60 Seconds is a movie that I saw with a bunch of my cousins in Michigan. We used to go up there, I don't know if every year, but every other year, and go to this, it was like family camping. My mom was one of 11 siblings, so big family. And the way that they would do like a reunion is they'd go to campsites and everybody would just have a camper so they could all be together and then kind of have your own place, and we'd spend a week together. I was in high school, and it was one of the last years I remember most of my cousins being there, us all hanging out, and I remember us just going like, hey, we're bored, what do we want to do today? Hey, let's go see a movie. So we started looking at the nearby theater and what's showing, and I just remember it being really cool. It was one of the first times I remember like, oh yeah, we're all going to go do like the thing that I like. It wasn't that it was my idea. We're doing it for me. But
no,
like,
I totally get that.
We're all going to a movie, and I'm sharing this with my cousins, and then I really enjoyed the movie, and it was just like, what a cool thing that I just shared with my family. Yes. So that was a movie with a special memory attached to it.
Totally. Also, and again, I could list a billion things, but I just remember times like going back farther. Like I remember when Independence Day came out. Okay, now that was a movie that there was a lot of hype for that movie and a lot of build up, and kind of same thing. I remember going to see it with my cousins and my aunt, and it was like we went really late at night to like an 11 o'clock show, and I was 16 at the time, and so it was like, oh, this is really cool. Like, we're going to a late show. I don't know why. That felt like it had some importance. It was like, oh man. So we get to go to a movie. We get to stay up really, really late. Like all these cool things. And then that was another movie where, like a rowdy theater, but in a good way.
Yeah.
Like a lot of hype for that movie. People were, ready for that movie. It was a packed theater, and it was like, they would cheer and laugh. Like Will Smith had a bunch of good one-liners, and it got a lot of. I've had to spend some time thinking about this, but that may be one of the first times I remember like some true like audience engagement in a movie.
Yeah,
where it was kind of like, okay, so you can like make some noise and stuff, but in a good way. Because it's always like if you go to the movies, you got to be quiet and you sit and you be respectful, and certainly I think that's true. But I think I maybe have to think about. I think Independence Day was one of the first movies where it was like, oh, you can interact with the movie. You just have to know how to do it and when to stop.
Yeah.
Because like Will Smith would, he'd get like the "Welcome to Earth," and it was like, yeah. And I remember some of that going on, but it was like it was done in the way you want it to be done.
Right.
So that's like a cool experience. I'm thankful for.
And I think I've mentioned this before too. Like I'll always remember watching The Nutty Professor with my family as a kid, because the dinner scene, Eddie Murphy playing all the characters, and they start doing all the like farting and stuff. It's so lowbrow humor, but the theater was laughing so hard. It's one of those.
It's contagious.
It's contagious, yeah. and so like you're belly laughing because all the people are belly laughing, and you can't even hear half the lines that are being said anymore because everyone's laughing so hard. And I just remember like that's what I think of when I think of like comedies are better with a group. I'm like, that's a movie that was greatly enhanced by watching with a group of people who were all laughing really hard at it.
Oh yeah, those are all great examples.
Some just little funnier examples of things that I remember from movie experiences. One is the movie Juno. Mm-hmm. The reason I remember that one is I was visiting Illinois when I was still living in Tennessee, visiting my friends Greg and Kurt, who I went to college with, and a whole group of us went to the movie theater. I think we went to the one in Savoy and go see Juno. And when we walk in the theater, it's pretty packed already. Mm-hmm. So we're like, we're not going to be able to sit together. We're going to have to like split up and find groups. And as we're splitting up, we realize that it's almost all couples. and me and my friend Kurt. So they all break off as couples, and then we're like standing there like, oh, it's just us. And then we start looking around the theater, and we realize the entire theater is couples.
Nice.
And we're like, this is a date movie, isn't
Yeah.
it? And so we're gonna go find, like, as we're walking in, like, you know, now you probably can't even make the jokes that we were making.
Right.
Like, we're walking in like, we're together, but we're not together,
Right,
everybody.
right,
You know,
right.
as we go sit down and
Yeah.
watch this movie, and we laughed a lot about that
Oh,
before
yeah.
and after the movie. Like, sure, thanks for taking us to a date movie, guys, and then abandoning us. to
Really
be on a
appreciate
date.
that. Yeah. Well, that would be another talking about your theme of like thankfulness. You think back of like, you know, just like movies like A Date. You know, like I always remember like my wife and I, the first movie we saw together, you know, was The Mummy, the Brendan Fraser movie.
Yeah.
You know, and whether that's good or not good, whatever. But you know, just
I like The Mummy.
yeah, it was fun. It was fun. And then of course they immediately started making bad sequels. But
Yeah.
so you look back and you're like, oh, that's always just going to be a talking about thankfulness. You know,
Yeah.
thankful to go that I went to see that movie, and that's kind of where our relationship started. So
Yeah. So on my list is the movie Dude, Where's My Car?
nice,
And
nice.
not a movie that you would expect to have any sort of
Definitely
great
not.
association with. But here's the story of Dude, Where's My Car for me is I've talked about the cheap theater that was near my house where movies had been out for a while before.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
They'd move out of the main theater before they're out for video. They'd go to the theater for a discounted price. It'd be
Right.
like $2. So me and several of my guy friends, that's all I had when I was in junior high and high school were guy friends.
Yeah.
Go to the theater, and they wanted to see Dude, Where's My Car? And I was kind of like, oh, this is going to be so dumb. But we get there, and while we're there, we see a girl who was in school with us and her family. And this girl was a girl that I had a huge crush on.
Mm-hmm.
She was an incredibly beautiful girl. And we were like friendly, you know, and we talked to her, oh, what are y'all going to see? We're like, oh, I'm going to see Dude, Where's My Car? What are y'all going to see? You know, she said whatever it was. And, you know, like, oh, cool, you know, see you later. And we go in the theater, and we're sitting there, and there's not hardly anybody in the theater in our row. And it gets started. She walks into Dude, Where's My Car? And goes and sits down kind of by herself.
Uh-huh.
We're looking around like, what's she doing in here? Like, I don't know. I was like, I'll be right back. And I walk over. I'm like, kind of walk over, catch her. Hey, what are you doing here? She's like, I had already seen the movie that my family's seeing. She's like, and I just figured maybe I'd just come to this. And I was like, so you're just by yourself? She's like, yeah. I was like, want some company? She's like, sure. And I was like, okay. And I sat down next to her. And I looked back at my friend's like, I'm here now.
Right. Like this is the thing that's happening.
Like, I'm watching the movie with her.
Yeah.
Like, and they were like,
Right.
yeah, cool,
right,
dude.
right, right.
So I watched Dude, Where's My Car with this girl that I, you know, had a huge crush on, and she was a sweet girl. Like,
Yeah.
it wasn't anything like, you know,
Yeah, but
like,
just
everybody was just like, the fates have never been kind to me, you know, and here it was, like,
here I am watching Dude, Where's My Car?
Yeah, and like, so that movie, I've never watched it since, you know. It's not like I go back and go like, oh, Dude, Where's My Car? I love that movie. It's just the memory of that theater experience of like,
Exactly.
you know, as a teenager, that was such a huge,
Yeah.
seminal thing. And
Yep.
ironically, I did see another movie with her at one point, and it was the Mummy sequel. So
The Mummy Returns or
yeah,
whatever.
and what was something that I still to this day do not know if it was a date or not. So
Still some confusion there, huh?
like, I was really hoping, but also like we were kind of friends, so it was entirely possible that I was so like unintimidated or not like, you know, somebody that nobody would look at as a dating potential.
Yeah.
That she was like, oh, you thought this was a date? Like, I thought we were just friends. And
That's
so,
the
like,
worst.
So
That's
I
the
never
worst.
asked for clarification or anything, but you know, so I don't know.
I just love that your two shared movies with this girl or Dude, Where's My Car? And The Mummy Returns.
Classic movies,
Like
man.
Mr. like Brady, I love these sophisticated movies, and it's like, Dude, Where's My Car? And The Mummy Returns.
Yeah,
So
listen,
funny.
This guy who's brainy and likes really smart movies, he didn't arrive until the 20s.
There you go. It took
obviously
some
my
time,
20s,
huh?
Yeah, I did not grow up with great, as we talked about before. My good taste
Taste,
in movies did
yeah.
not happen until much later in life because early on I liked everything.
Yeah. Another one that just popped into my head is like a fun shared experience was Top Gun Maverick.
Oh yeah.
Like that was just like, I don't even know how to explain that. Like everyone just left, and it's like you just want to stand around with all the people you just saw that with, and like I don't know. You're just like, man, what an awesome movie. You know what I mean? Like that that was a cool shared experience where it was like everyone left. I think that movie like so happy and just It's like you just want to be like, aren't we all just better Americans and better friends now that we just watch this movie together? And it's just like some complete stranger who's like, dude, what are you talking about?
Yeah, there's something about movies like that where you feel like you just want to turn around and high five a stranger.
That's what I'm trying to say.
It's like being at a sporting event almost.
Your
team scores a touchdown, and you're all just like.
That's exactly what it is. That whole movie was like your team just scored a touchdown.
Yeah.
Yep.
That was a good one.
That was an awesome shared experience.
Yeah. Again, I think we've talked about this. Not great movies, but the Avatar movies I'll always think of fondly for the theater experience. Again, both of them I've only watched in the theater. I've had no interest in watching them on a regular TV. Same. But both of them, I remember sitting in the theater and just being like, I can't believe they can do this. Like, James Cameron, how do you do it?
Oh, yeah.
And it's being amazing.
And obviously, because the first one is the first one, I'm like you. I just remember sitting there and I was like, they can do this? Like, this is unbelievable. And we saw the first one, in a theater. And, that was one where they hadn't ruined the 3D gimmick yet. It actually felt, I don't know if fresh is the right word. And it was like, pretty quickly, you're like, this movie warrants the 3D.
Right.
And that was like, I swear to you, that movie almost made me feel like a kid again. Yeah. Where I was just sitting there like, wow, like this is like you almost wanted to like reach out, like even as an adult, because you're just like, this is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like this is amazing.
No, you're absolutely right. And you're right about the 3D like feeling so good. It was actually misleading because I think there have been some like attempts at 3D, but nothing had really worked in 3D before. And that comes out and it's like, you watch it and you think this is the future of movies. And studios thought this is the future of movies, but it turns out not the future.
Do you remember that
movies.
When there's like every movie was like I remember going to see like the I don't remember who directed it now, Godzilla. Like, do you remember that? I almost said Matt Reeves, but it's not Matt Reeves.
It's
like 2014-ish.
Yeah.
And I remember going to see that with my dad, and the only one that was playing at the time was in 3D. And that was like the first time I was angry, where I was like, what a money grab. Like there is literally no reason for that movie to be in 3D. Are you researching?
There was so much post-production 3D
editing. Yes. And then they just, like 2 weeks before the movie was going to come out, they'd be like, guess what? Now you can see it in 3D.
Yeah. It was Gareth Edwards.
Thank you.
Which is what I thought.
That would have driven me crazy.
Gareth is such a weird name. It was like, Gareth Edwards is what it sounds right. Can that be right? Gareth?
I'm glad you let that out.
Yeah, Gareth Edwards. Which actually, I really like that Godzilla movie. But
it was fun. Yeah, it's fine.
It did not need any 3D.
3D, like, come on, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Avatar, especially that first one. And the second one, which I'm like you, I really don't think I'll ever watch those movies again for the rest of my life. But it doesn't mean I don't appreciate that theater experience.
Right.
Even with the second one, because it was like, this is unbelievable.
Yeah. I think the only other movie besides the Avatar movies that I thought benefited from 3D was Doctor Strange. Mm-hmm. I thought it was actually really good with all the bending of the world stuff. Like the 3D in that was very impressive as well.
Yep.
Sticking on the topic of girls, the movie Moneyball always special to me because that's a movie that I saw for my birthday with a girl that was then my fiance at the time, and it was just like this. All my life's coming together right now.
Right.
Was in love at the moment. She took me to Moneyball on my birthday. It's an Aaron Sorkin movie with Brad Pitt.
Everything was really working out for you that day.
Yeah, that I don't look back, like it's not like someone says, what's the best of your life? I look back and go, that day. But I look back and I'm like, yeah, it's hard to top.
Everything was really going well at that time.
Everything was going well for me on that day.
Yep.
Some of the other things I wrote down actually are not theater experiences, but just things I look back movie watching wise. One is just, I remember getting my DVD player. When DVD first came out, I may have mentioned this before, I remember spending my own money on getting a DVD player, and I can't remember how old I was, like 15 or something. So like I wasn't even making a lot of money. I think I was just doing odd jobs occasionally to earn money. And my dad being like, "You sure you want to spend money?"
Dude, those things were expensive at the time.
He's kind of convinced like.
Do you remember what you paid for it?
It was like $300 or something. And my dad, you could tell he's trying to be a good dad. He's like, if this is what you want to do with your money, you can. He's like, but
really, he was thinking what a waste of money.
You're going to regret this type thing. And I'm like, no, like this. I want this. And so I got my DVD player. We had just gotten, hey, this it's so funny to think about, 35-inch TV, which seemed huge at the time. That thing was probably 1,000 pounds.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh, yeah.
a big block TV that's on a stand. Got a DVD player, and the first 2 DVDs I bought were Saving Private Ryan and The 13th Warrior. Bought them like together.
Yeah.
And I remember just going home and being like, this is my home setup. This 35-inch TV, a DVD player, these movies, you know, and watching them and just being like, just thinking like, how does it get better than this?
That's a great point, and it'd be so hard for like my kids to understand what a big deal getting a DVD player was.
Yeah,
my wife bought me a DVD player the first Christmas we were married, and it was like, you know, it was like a big surprise. Just like pulled it out from under the bed, and it was like, oh my gosh, like we can afford this, which we probably couldn't, but it was like that's how big of a deal they were. It was like, how did you get this? It was like it was heavy. Like now they make these little tiny lightweight things. Like this one was, it was like big and heavy, and it was a big deal.
Yeah, and man, just the quality difference.
Oh my gosh!
Again, like I said, young people these days will not know like the jumps
understand.
that we saw in quality throughout our lives.
Huge leaps. Like I remember one of the first DVDs I watched was Twister, and it was like, oh my gosh, like that's a great point. That really taps into like the great feelings. Like, oh my gosh, and like you, I'm like, this is in my house. Like I just get to sit here and watch Twister on a DVD, and like I'm set. This is all I'll ever need in life.
Yeah, and honestly, you know, as I was thinking about like Thanksgiving and what are we thankful for, I'm thankful for how far the home watching experience has come, because
it's so easy now.
As I think about like, you know, as we complained a little last week about like movies that don't go into theaters, you know, because theater's still just the best way to watch it. Theater will always be the best way to watch a movie. But that said, it's amazing how good the home watching experience is.
It is.
And being able to buy affordable, very big screen TVs with amazing clarity, get a sound bar with this little subwoofer, and it is
amazing,
you know,
what you can do.
I'm watching my house, and I'm just going like, I shouldn't take this for granted, how awesome the home watching experience is, because it's become incredible.
Well, especially like I'm old enough where I am like, okay, you got to get up, turn on the TV, pop in the VHS, go sit back, like
rewind it,
like all that stuff. Like I remember the most angry you could ever get is if like you rented a movie and the person who had the movie before you didn't rewind it, and you're like, what kind of monster didn't rewind this movie, and now I have to rewind the movie before I can start watching it? And it amounted to like 2 minutes of your time, but it felt like a huge deal.
You'd get like anxious as you're rewinding, so you'd stop and start it to be like, how close am I to, okay, all right, stop.
Oh again.
Yeah. You're rewinding it for a friend who hasn't seen it. You're like, don't look.
And like inevitably, you'd have to see where you were, so you'd hit play. And like the big scene that you didn't want, that is like, why did I stop it here? Like it was terrible. But you know what though? Talking about like your whole theme of like thankfulness and stuff. I am thankful that I have experienced all those eras. Like from the have to get up to turn the channel to the one click of a button and the killer, which we talked about last week, is on my nice clear TV, and the sound, you know, like it's fun to have been through all those eras.
Absolutely. And it's really hard to imagine like what's next, because
you couldn't have imagined when I was, you know, driving, or my mom was driving me to the video store to rent the VHS to come home. I would have never imagined everything would just be at the click of a button.
Yeah, it's insane.
The only thing this is a little bit of a sidetrack, but the only thing I think is lost though, like it doesn't feel quite as special because you don't have to work for it now.
You're right.
Like that was an amazing feeling. Like, okay, I'm going to drive to the video store, or have my mom and dad drive me to the video store. I have to cross my fingers and hope that the movie I want is in. So you go and it is in. So that feeling alone was amazing. You get it, you take it to the counter, you check out, you pay for it, you come home, you had to physically put it in, whether it was VHS or DVD, you know, and like it was all work. So when you finally sat down and watched it, it did feel rewarding.
Right, you've got to invest it. The same thing goes for theaters too. Like I love seeing movies in theaters with hardly anybody in it, where it just feels like space, because you know it's gonna be quiet.
Yeah.
You know, like there's not gonna be no distractions. You're not like I'm sitting by a stranger. But at the same time, we talked about it. There's something to knowing a theater's gonna be packed, knowing you have to have that ticket in advance.
Oh yeah.
You know, that anxiety of getting to a theater on opening night, being like, I really hope that we can get in.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the last time I've had to feel that because theaters just aren't packed like that anymore.
No.
So, like you said, there's not that investment or that concern anymore. I do think if I had to guess where things are going, and I don't know, because this almost feels like maybe this is more along the lines of 3D, where it felt like an advancement that was going to happen that didn't, would be the virtual reality headsets that make you feel like you're in a theater as you watch. And I'm like, maybe that's the future that, like... I'll probably be grumpy old man at that point going, you darn kids and your headsets that
I'm not putting that thing on.
But, yeah, just coming back, like you're saying, not just even the investment, but there's something about the physical, tangible thing you can touch. I miss this with music too, like with CDs. Like the artwork was important.
It was.
You know, like what they put on the cover.
Oh yeah.
With DVDs and Blu-rays introduced like the booklets inside. You know, like again with CDs too. Like it was always great to open it up, see what does the disc look like.
That's the first thing I would
do. You know, because when it looked cool, there's nothing really added to the movie, obviously, but when the disc looks cool, it's like, oh man, how cool is that? They put that level of detail and thought into making their disc look cool, and things like that. Just
it's all lost now.
Lost,
it's really unfortunate.
Yeah, those little extra touches, and even, you know, I probably these days wouldn't even have time for these sort of things, but the DVD extras. You know, for a movie that goes right to Netflix, there's no extras section. There's no
making of the killer.
Right.
Yeah. And that was like, that felt like you were, like if it was a movie you loved, it felt like you were accessing a whole new world to this movie that you never knew existed. Yeah. Like I remember after getting my DVD player, pretty quickly afterwards, one of the first movies I got on DVD was Halloween. The original Halloween. And that thing was loaded. I mean, deleted scenes, original trailer, a making, like an hour-long making of, and I can't even explain the excitement I had to sit. Like I didn't even know where to start. I was like, do I watch the original trailer first? Do I watch the making of? Do I watch the deleted scenes? Like it was like my head was going to explode because this was you know, there was internet, but it was early internet, and it wasn't like I could just YouTube like the making of Halloween. Like all this stuff felt like. It didn't feel like it. It was. This was the only way I would ever see this stuff.
Right.
It was to own this DVD. Now I get to watch something that, you know, if you didn't have the DVD, you just didn't get to see it.
Right.
And so to see like deleted scenes from Halloween, which is a movie I've always loved and have watched since I was a kid, and now I'm 20 years old and I'm like, wait, there's stuff I haven't seen, and I could never get my kids to understand what that felt like. They just wouldn't understand.
Yeah. Same thing for director's commentary, which I think nowadays sounds insane to say that you would sit down and watch a movie with people talking over it about making the movie. But because, like you said, the limited access to hearing a director talk about their film. Like now you go on YouTube, you can find everywhere they were interviewed, everywhere they've talked about it, and you're going to, you know, when they're at festivals, when they're on the tour.
That's all they do.
And you can find so much, but like you said, back then you couldn't. If you weren't at those things, or you know, so the only way to know, like, you know, what's David Fincher like, is to watch the director's commentary with David Fincher talking. And you're like, oh man, like this is what he sounds like, and how he interacts with people, and his thoughts on movies. And
I knew what David Fincher's voice sounded like before I knew what his face looked like.
Yeah,
like I didn't know what he looked like. You know, I remember listening to the DVD commentary of Seven. And I was like, okay, now I can at least put a voice to the name. But I didn't know what he looked like.
That's a great point. Like,
no clue.
Outside of maybe a couple of directors, you wouldn't know what these people looked like.
Yeah, no clue.
You're not online, like, seeing pictures of them associated with everything.
No. There was no IMDb to go to be like, oh, okay, here's a picture of David Fincher. Now I know what he looks like. Yeah. It's crazy.
But as we talk about, like, of course, I'm never going to wish to go back because it is so convenient to have all that information. It's so great that if I want to know more about a movie, I can just go YouTube, search it, and I'll probably find a whole bunch of stuff.
Yep.
But there is something about the feeling of it being exclusive, about it being rare, about like I'm getting a peek that nobody else is getting.
Yes.
That That is lost.
And it's like, if you listen to, like, say, the director's commentary on Seven, and you learn, like, they were like, okay, so in this scene, we actually, and you're like, you felt like you then had, like you were privileged to information that nobody else knew. Yeah. And you could go tell your other movie friends, like, hey, guess what? I know something that you don't know about how they made Seven. And you really did have access that not a lot of other people, or you had information that not a lot of other people had. It was an incredible time.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, this conversation, it's such a great conversation because it just reminds me how much I love movies.
Same. That's kind of like, that's what my whole next category is about.
And yeah, let's jump into that. So just tell me some of the.
Sure.
It's the movies you were just glad that you were around.
Is
that it?
Well, one thing I had on here was like talking about being thankful and good memories. So what I'm thankful for, and these are a lot of non-theater experiences, but it's movies that I watched that helped me understand how much I love movies. Mm-hmm. And I'll give you an example. So what I wrote down here is around the same time, I want to say in that 12 to 13-year-old range, I watched The Godfather and I watched Goodfellas. Pretty close to each other. I don't remember exactly, like the month or anything like that, but I know I watched them pretty close together. And watching those two movies close together, really, it was like a light bulb moment for me where I learned that movies could be like prestige and entertaining at the same time. I don't know if that makes any sense or not. Yeah. But like we've talked about before, like you realize, like I realize, like, okay, I think I'm a movie guy. I think I like movies. So you start to research or you read or you see, and then everyone's like, the greatest movie ever made is Citizen Kane. Okay, I'll watch Citizen Kane. And then I'm watching it and I'm like falling asleep during it. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. So I watched The Godfather and then I was like, here we go. I understood that this was one of the greatest movies ever made, and it also entertained me from start to finish. And those two things, those two ideas merging together was huge for me. And Goodfellas the same thing. Whereas, like, clearly this is one of the best movies ever made, and I'm so entertained by it. So it got rid of that notion that, like, if a movie is considered a classic, it's probably going to be kind of boring and stuff. Yeah. So does that make any sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the whole, like, the popular opinion versus the critics' opinion. Yeah. And a lot of people think that those are always opposed.
Yeah.
But then going like, no, the smart people who do this professionally and me, like, we can agree.
Yes.
We can overlap. That Venn diagram can cross.
Yep. So that was huge for me. Watching Taxi Driver for the first time, which is a Scorsese movie. So Taxi Driver is this really violent, like, gritty movie with Robert De Niro. He's a taxi driver. And I remember reading once, like, an interview with Scorsese, like reading in a book, because, again, no internet. And Scorsese was like, this is a movie about loneliness. And that was another big light bulb moment where I was like, okay, so movies, even a movie like Taxi Driver, which is not an action movie at all, but it ends in, like, a big violent shootout and stuff. And it was like, me learning that movies can represent ideas. I'm probably not phrasing that very well. But it was like, when he said this is a movie that's actually about loneliness, mm-hmm. that clicked something in my brain. Where then I felt like I could understand movies at a different level. Whereas, where it's like, here's what's on screen, here's what it is on the screen and what it's trying to say. So that was a big moment for me, too, that I look back, I'm very thankful for.
Yeah. Taxi Driver for me was, I don't know if it was the first, but it's the movie that I most associate with watching and going like, wow, like, this is really just about a guy that the filmmaker's just trying to say is interesting, but obviously not good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, of course, the scene that's the most, like, shocking and jarring is he's got a date with the beautiful, classy girl, and he takes her to the adult theater, and you're just in there going like, dude, what are you doing?
You're like, it's the most uncomfortable.
How could you think this is? And you're like, I'm watching a psychopath.
Yeah.
And it's not like you said, it's not played for entertainment. It's played to be uncomfortable as can be.
Yes.
And the movie ended, and I remember just being like, I can't believe that. Like,
yeah.
But wow, what a thing to do to make a movie about that guy.
Yeah.
And how odd it is.
Yes.
And
that, I guess that's
different.
It's kind of what I'm saying, where it was like a movie can be more than just, Back to the Future or something, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. But I'm just saying Taxi Driver is the first movie that the first time I understood a movie can be about more than just what you're seeing on the screen. And then like after he takes her to that movie, there's a scene where he calls her on a payphone and he's apologizing. He's basically like groveling, oh, I'm so sorry, please give me another chance. And the camera's on De Niro on the phone, and as he's talking on the phone to the woman who he took to the movie, the camera just pans away from him and shows this empty hallway while he's talking on the phone. And I also remember reading an interview with Scorsese where he was like, I did that because I wanted the viewer to understand or to feel that like this is too uncomfortable. I can't handle watching this. So he moved the camera away. And I was like, whoa. Like the camera is telling me, like, do you know what I mean? Like, It was the movie that just took my understanding of movies to the next level, maybe, is what I'm ultimately trying to say.
Yeah.
And that's an experience I'm so thankful for, because then, like I said, it helped me to take that jump where it's like, okay, there are movies that are just, they are what they are, and they're just for entertainment. But then there's movies that are trying to say something. Or like you said, just here's we're fascinated by this character, and we're just going to spend time with them, whether they're good character, bad character, evil, whatever.
Yeah. I love details like that in movies.
Me too.
One movie always comes to my mind with that is the movie Ex Machina. And I watched a making of feature on that, and I was already like obsessed with the movie. And as I'm watching the making of, they're talking about in these scenes where our main protagonist Caleb is talking to Ava, the AI character, and she's shifting like her posture, like she'll be like sitting down, talking to him, and then standing up, and they're like, if you pay attention, every time she's like sitting down, it's giving the impression that he has the upper hand in the conversation. And then like you can see when it shifts, like when she can tell I've got the upper hand now, like she stands up above him. And I'm like, I would have never thought of that symbolically. But then I start, then I watch it again and I start noticing like, oh, it is flipping here. Like she is like, and you don't even have to know that. You don't even have to consciously make a connection, but just the fact that people are putting those details into movies.
That's what I'm talking about with Taxi Driver.
So interesting. Yep. You're right. Yeah. So yeah, like those facts are fascinating.
Yes, absolutely. I love some of that. And I won't list everything, but another example I had was like watching Reservoir Dogs for the first time. And I've talked about this a little bit. That was the first time I was ever like, oh, a movie doesn't have to like play by the rules.
Yeah.
That, like I've said on other podcasts, like they're talking about like pulp culture and they're talking about other movies and they're just talking about their personal lives, the criminals, I mean. And I was like, wait, you can do that in a movie? And it was the first movie I ever saw that was like non-linear, or it was like here's this scene, but now all of a sudden we're going to jump backwards. And it was like, whoa, that blew my mind at 12 or 13 years old.
Yeah.
And so that was a movie that showed me like you don't have to play by this set of what I thought were like this set of rules the movie had to follow, where it was just straightforward. The characters can only talk about the plot of the movie. You can't play with time, and like it just took the safety net completely off from me. And that's just a big moment that I remember, and that brings back just that, just those feelings of like learning something new about movies. And it was like, oh, that's amazing. You can do whatever you want in a movie.
Yeah. Did you have anything more from your list you wanted to add? Because I think I've mentioned everything on mine. I guess I will throw out Snowpiercer is a movie that I always look back on fondly, because I think I've mentioned 2014 was like a year that reinvigorated my love of movies. And it started with Snowpiercer because it was such a different movie from anything that I had seen. And when I was done watching it, I was just like, oh yeah, like man, I could feel new again in movies and fresh. And then I just started diving right back in.
Sure.
And, like being excited for movies again. And I
still
don't even know why my love of movies never went away, but it had dimmed, and then that just reignited it. So
I mean, the only other thing I think is worth mentioning is just a couple quick things. Number one is seeing Jurassic Park in the theater. And that moment where he, kind of grabs her head and turns it to see that dinosaur. That is the first, this is going to sound so nerdy. That's the first time I ever remember getting like goosebumps in a movie. Like, it's hard, again, going back to like, it's hard to explain to people what a moment that was. Where you were just like, that was the moment when the first time I realized like special effects have gotten to the point now where anything is possible. And at that time it was fresh, so it wasn't, I didn't have a bad view of it at the time. I kind of have a bad view of it now, where it's unfortunate that almost that you can do anything in a movie with special effects.
Right. That
was such a moment where it was like I said, like goosebumps on my arm. It was like, oh my gosh. And that music, that John Williams score kicks in, and that was just an incredible moment that I'm so thankful for.
Yeah, I'm still a little bitter to this day. I did not get to see Jurassic Park in theaters.
That's too
my
bad.
brother went to go see it with some people, and it was kept a secret from me. My parents did not want me to see it because they were afraid I was too young and I would get scared.
Well, it was 93, so you would have been, like 7 or 8 or 9 or so.
Or maybe I was still 8 when it came out. And I was so mad that I didn't even know fully what the movie was. I just knew, like, my brother's going to see some exciting movie.
So I want to go,
And then I got to see it when it came out on video. We watched it at my house. And I loved it so much.
Oh, my gosh.
I, like the rest of the world, was my introduction to what a raptor was. And I thought they were, like, the coolest thing. It's kind of a big joke now that there's an NBA team called the Raptors because Jurassic Park was such a big movie. And I'm like, you know what? If I had started an NBA franchise around that time, I probably would have called it the Raptors because that movie was so so big.
And then I just had a list, which I don't even have to go through, but just big important movies that I'm just so thankful I've seen throughout my life.
You want to just hit a couple?
Sure. Like, these are just, for me personally, like, I remember being a kid and watching Ghostbusters. Okay. And that just felt like that was so cool. And it was like, I felt like it was scary, but it was funny, and that was cool. Like E.T. was one. I saw Titanic in the theaters, which I'm not saying is my favorite movie, but it was an important movie.
And again, Cameron, like the things he was doing in that movie were very impressive.
Yep, absolutely. I mentioned Batman. I saw the original Home Alone in the theater. Saving Private Ryan. I just random movies that have nothing to do with each other, but are just big, important movies. And I look back, I'm like, I saw that in the theater, and that's just experiences that I'm thankful for. Important movies that I'm glad I got to see in the theater.
Yeah,
and certainly there's dozens, but those were just some that popped into my head.
Yeah, absolutely. Good conversation.
Oh my gosh, I feel like I just ate a bunch of candy, like we were joking about you, because I just talk about all these fun memories and it gets me so excited.
Yeah, and it makes me excited for the hope of more movies to come. My hope is maybe after this Thanksgiving Thursday, I'll be all excited and talking about some great movies that I saw, in the theater. And we've talked about it before. We hope the older we get, the more we're not like just stuck on the old movies, and we still get to experience some of these things.
I hope so.
So I'm optimistic that
I'm optimistic too, especially after this year, like we talked about with like the Oppenheimer, Killers of the Flower Moon, and The Killer. Those are 3 good examples where it's like movies can still be awesome.
Yeah,
they can still be amazing, and they can have big ideas, and they can be entertaining, and all these things. So
and they can still like find room in our hearts to be some of our new favorites.
Yep. So I hope the future's bright, but it was fun to think backwards on all these things.
Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for joining us.
Yep.
We hope you all have an awesome Thanksgiving.
Yes.
And we will see you guys next week.
Absolutely.